welcome everyone. We're excited to have you here with us today for what is the last session in the Courageous Leaders series for the year. So thank you to those of you who have joined us previously. And if this is your first session, don't worry, we're going to still give you access to some of the things that we've discussed throughout the year. So our final session today is going to be focused on creating a culture of feedback. And we have been focusing on various elements related to organizational development and what it looks like to create caring environments in the spaces that we lead. A lot of this is done through an organizational lens in the more traditional sense of the workplace, but you'll also find that the concepts and the things we talk about today are translatable to volunteer groups that you're a part of. Honestly, even family. We'll talk a little bit today about what it looks like to model receiving and giving feedback, even in a personal setting. Okay. The previous sessions that we've touched on, we've come a long way. We've talked about what it looks like to be leading in the world that's changing very fast, how we focus on building trust, how we have coaching cultures, how we really help people connect with their purpose and develop meaning and see the bigger picture, the why behind what it is that they're doing. All of these will be available to you in a YouTube playlist, and Lainey will drop a link into the chat for you if you want to grab that and throw it in a tab somewhere on your computer. Feel free to do that before we get too far into the session. And then as we move into our actual content for today, there will be a few other things that get dropped in the chat for you. So our learning objectives that we're going to cover will be listed for you in the thought organizer, and Lainey will be dropping that into the chat for you as well. And I'll give everyone a few seconds if you want to pull that up. This is an editable PDF format where you can take notes as we go through. Or if you're somebody who likes to keep those documents very pristine and take notes in a notebook, you're welcome to do that and track along with us as we go through that as well. When we hit the end of the session today, also, just as so you have a heads up, we really like to provide people with something we call a take back, and that will be a document that we'll share with you that will let you take back some of this information into other settings, individual and unique to your own life. Okay. Lainey, did I miss any logistical things before I jump into the content?
No, I think we're all set, and I just put the thought organizer in the chat for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's talk through what our content is going to look like for today. We have 4 learning objectives that we hope to cover in the next 60 minutes. The first thing we're going to do is take a little time to think about and recognize what prevents us as leaders from giving developmental feedback to people. There are likely some things that come up for you as you kind of try to imagine yourself in a space where you're about to give feedback to someone. And so we're going to look at, like, what do we sort of need to maybe revisit in that space? How can we reframe some of our thoughts and emotions around that if it does feel scary or maybe a little risky at least? The second thing we're going to do is take a look at the value and the impact feedback messages have in shaping the behavior of another person, but really truly how this shapes the kind of culture that we're trying to create within an organization or a personal space, like I said, like with a volunteer group or even a family unit. We're also going to explain how to receive and deliver feedback like a leader. We carry a profound responsibility when we are in that leadership role, whatever that looks like, and how we model both receiving and giving feedback has the ability to profoundly impact the people who are in our span of care. And the final thing we'll look at is understanding how important it is to use recognition when we're creating a culture of feedback. And the cool thing about this is that giving recognition is often much less intimidating than giving feedback. And so if we lean into practicing this and understanding how this sets a foundation for feedback, it can feel like a very tangible action step for all of us as we move forward. The only other thing I want to mention, just kind of from a personal standpoint, is to please feel free to make the session your own. You're obviously here investing an hour of your time. If as we're talking, you have a particular thing that pops up for you that you want to ask about, or maybe you want to get feedback on from other people who are on the call today, please feel comfortable to drop those things in the chat, to raise your hand, to come off mute. We want to make sure you get what you need today as we go through the session. All right, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the why behind this. As we think about organizational development, we know that we can have the greatest strategies and strategic plans and objectives and even mission. And if our organizational culture is not robust and healthy, it will be very hard for us to achieve anything along the path in terms of moving the organization forward. It's not uncommon, right? As if you look at an organization where you can have very clear goals and objectives, but if there's internal conflict or uncertainty or people don't feel safe to express themselves, then we're not in a great space. So we recognize, as we see in this quote, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Drucker, that workplace culture is a critical business asset. This is something that we have to focus on. And we recognize that leaders have a unique ability to impact and model and shape the workplace culture. When you look at some of these statistics, hopefully it's kind of connecting and resonating that leadership really do have a profound responsibility. 76% of employees say that they believe their leaders set the workplace culture. Kind of interesting to think about the fact that if we're not intentionally creating a workplace culture, we are probably unintentionally creating some kind of norm for what that workplace culture looks like. So our hope would be we want to get our arms around that and see how intentional we can be. 36% don't believe that their supervisors know how to lead a team. Kind of a painful thing to read. If any of us are in those spaces, that's a perception that at least is out there. And then almost 60% of people who leave a job say that it's because their workplace culture or their leader was the reason behind that decision. So clearly, as leaders, we have a responsibility here. We want to just kind of step into the space and try to figure out what does that mean for us then. Okay, so as it connects to feedback, one of the things that we want to shift into thinking about from our leadership role, ooh, excuse me, is why we maybe tend to avoid it. Why do we not step into the space of giving it? One of the first reasons is that we might have concerns about authority, and that might mean more from a standpoint, we wonder about how we will be perceived. Does it lessen our authority? Does it make us look like we are not sure what we're doing? The second thing that can happen is there's a lot of fear of negative emotions. Okay, I see some people nodding to that one, right? The idea of receiving feedback that could be uncomfortable to hear is a very real one. So some of us think, I'm just not sure I want to open myself up to that and then have to process through it. The third thing is that identity can come into play. I don't know about all of you, I know for a very long time, I really did tend to define sort of my value and myself based on how I felt like I was perceived in the workplace, the role that I had, the impact I felt like I was having through work. That was a really key part of my identity. And in those situations where maybe somebody gives you feedback that you're not landing the way that you'd like to, or maybe doing things in a way that fits for everyone, it can almost feel like a very personal thing where it starts to kind of make you wonder, well, wait a minute, who am I? Like, this is a very important part of my life. If I'm not doing it well, what does that mean? Okay, so identity can be another reason that we tend to avoid. And then honestly, one of the biggest things is most organizations lack the understanding for how to give feedback well and in kind of a safe and encouraging way, as well as just having a feedback culture in general. My background for many, many years was working in a human resources space, and we did a lot of leadership training and development, but it was much later into my career when I got connected to the Chapman Foundation that we really started thinking about training organizations in feedback. So it is really an important part of the culture to try to put in place. But again, it's not necessarily a norm that a lot of people have when they think about the training suite for their employees. Okay. With that, we're going to hit our first reflection question. And I want to give you a few minutes in your thought organizer to have a time to sort of reflect and respond, see from a personal perspective where this is hitting for you. So the first question here is just, what are reasons that you might tend to avoid feedback? This might be something in the 4 that we just discussed, or something else outside of that. And then the second question, what is the impact on an organization or a family unit or a volunteer group if leaders avoid feedback? Okay, when leaders avoid feedback. And we'll have a moment to open this up for group discussion when we're done. So take a good 2 to 3 minutes to get your thoughts down, capture some ideas. All right, take another few seconds to kind of wrap up your thoughts and your comments there. And we're going to shift over into a group discussion. As Lainey said, if you're able to come on camera for this part of the session or come off mute to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. But let's start with the second question. What do we think that the impact is on an organization when leaders avoid feedback?
I can say something, Leah.
Thank you.
This is Jean, and I think avoiding feedback, that's just a cascading effect that just kind of undermines the culture you hopefully are trying to build. But just losing trust in the sense of things aren't going to change. If I can't provide feedback, I can't give feedback, they're just going to kind of stagnate there. And so that kind of trickles into maybe all the work you could be doing, either in your projects or in your collaboration with your team, but especially at the leadership level. No, we're good. I don't want to hear about anything that's wrong. Everything's fine. Head in the sand. Let's keep moving on.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes. Tina, I saw you come off mute too. Did you want to share?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think you lose the ability to address something at its infancy or the really at the beginning of the issue before it becomes something very large.
Yeah, great point. Or maybe lose the opportunity to address something at all if we don't even know that it's going on. Yeah. Anybody else?
This is Annetta. Ditto on everything that has been said, and I would just add, growth diminishes. The more you avoid whatever growth you had, and I guess that means things can't change, but it definitely diminishes growth and lack of connection can be either severed or just held at a minimum. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Annetta. Any other thoughts? And if you're not in a space where it's conducive for you to come off of mute, we understand that too. You can also drop comments in the chat, and Lainey can catch and relay those out to the group as well.
I guess the only other thing I was thinking of is that you lose the opportunity for solutions that you may not think of.
Ooh. Okay, yeah, Tina, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but do you want to expand on that a little bit? Like what does that look like then?
Well, I always know that I don't know everything and that I don't have all knowledge. So if I listen to those around me, they might have some great solutions that I would not have thought of. And so as a collective mind, we have a greater knowledge.
Yeah, thank you very much. Lainey, I just want to check with you. Is there anything in the chat before we move on?
Yes, someone just put in the chat that it reinforces that culture is unsafe for transparency.
Right. Okay, awesome. I appreciate the thoughts and the input. We'll continue to have space for that as we move through things today. And I am going to give you a heads up that we will have a little later in the session an opportunity to practice crafting a feedback message. So I just want to give people a little bit of time to be thinking of maybe a person or a situation that you know you maybe need to give some feedback to. So that when we get to that point, you're kind of got the situation in your mind and you're ready to roll and practice the actual tool. Okay, so let's make the shift here into talking about if we believe there's value in having a culture of feedback, what do we do to create it? Now, again, as leaders, we have the unique opportunity to really kind of initiate the values and behaviors that we want to see in the culture. And I would personally say that it's often safer for your people in the organization if you begin modeling what it looks like to receive feedback, right? And solicit maybe feedback from other people. So we're going to focus on that first. what does it look like to receive feedback as a leader? Okay, so there are a few different things that we have to be prepared to do if we want to make this part of the organization's culture and invite feedback to be given to us. Okay, the first thing is fairly simple when you read it, often challenging to do. But the first thing is to just exercise your power to pause, okay? Because in the moment, receiving a painful piece of feedback, potentially, right? A painful piece of feedback, or even just something that's a little bit disruptive. Maybe it just challenges the way you've been thinking about something. That can cause some emotion in us. And we need to be prepared to let that emotion settle down again. In our listens class, we learn a lot about what this concept looks like and actual specific tools to kind of work our way through letting that emotion dissipate. But again, it's just important for us to make sure we're back in a balanced state before we're responding to someone in the moment. The second thing, again, a pretty foundational concept that likely many of us have heard before, also sometimes challenging to do in practice, but is to assume positive intent. It's not unlikely that the person coming to give you feedback may do it in a moment of emotion, and they may not have worded their feedback in the most, positive way. It could be jumbled. It might feel angry. And we just need to be able to kind of remind ourselves from a framework perspective, like, okay, there is probably a positive intent in this. They're trying to communicate something to me. Maybe how they're doing it isn't necessarily helpful in the moment, but if I can assume that the intent is positive, that they're trying to let me know how they feel, that they're hoping something will improve in the organization as a result, that can help me be better prepared to receive the feedback well. And then the third thing is to just recognize we are leading by how we live out just each moment of our day, right? So modeling how to receive feedback well is a really important thing for us to do. It's possible that someone who's really worked up and comes in and delivers feedback to us might be most sort of moved and inspired by our ability to just calmly receive it and thank them, for taking the time to share it with us. And we'll talk about this mostly through an organizational lens, but it struck me as I was getting ready for the session that this happens even in family spaces. I have 3 teenagers and we do a lot of extracurricular events. It feels like a very common culture in our household is hurry up and get your stuff. We got to go. Like we're moving from one thing to the next. And there was one day where we were rushing out to load everything in the car, and my daughter got a little frustrated with me and said, "You stress me out so much more in these moments by just like the way you're acting, by being so stressed." And I had to stop because honestly, in the moment, I was thinking, well, if you guys had prepped everything like I asked you to the night before, we probably wouldn't be in this space right now. But taking just, again, a quick moment to pause, to recognize that she's out of balance, that I don't want her to have that stressed feeling, and then to model back to her. It was maybe a 15-second interaction, but I was able to just say to her, "You know what, Lauren? Thank you. Let me just take a breath and try to calm down. You're right. Like it's not going to help any of us to be kind of rushing around in this stressed out mode." Okay. So something as simple as that, we can do that in the family space. We can also do it in a workplace perspective, right? To say to someone, "Wow, this was probably really hard for you to bring to me. I appreciate that this is something that you're trying to do. I want to think about what you've said." Okay. So taking a moment to pause, assuming positive intent, and realizing that we're modeling in the moment how to receive feedback well. There are 5 specific steps that we also think are very helpful to help you move through that, okay? The first one is, again, simply to say thank you. You have articulated already in our group discussion a couple of points that I think connect to this specifically. And one of the ways that it's helped me kind of reframe as I think about receiving feedback is, if they're not giving me feedback, what are they doing instead? And chances are they're gossiping about it to somebody else, which creates an unhealthy culture that takes much longer to deal with. Or they're unhappy and holding it in, maybe job searching, looking for another space to go, or they're just not very motivated. And so potentially it's impacting the way that they're doing their job. When I can think about some of those trade-offs, the fact that someone has been brave enough to bring me feedback and talk about it out loud feels like a really big gift. Okay. And so just thanking them for having the courage to bring something up to you is a great first step. The second thing you can do, partly to help you pause and buy some time, would be to either ask for some clarification or just try to rephrase back to them what it is you think they're hearing. Especially if someone's really worked up, saying something like, can you just let me see if I have captured this correctly? And then kind of repeat back to them what it is that you've heard. That can go a long way in helping them bring their emotion down, right? If they hear that you're listening, which again is another thing that we dive more deeply into in the listens class, that's a really powerful way to connect with someone. The third thing you'll need to do then is figure out how much time do you need to give it. It's possible that in the moment the feedback is simple enough that it's a fairly quick thing. Maybe you don't need a lot of time. Maybe you instantly recognize, ooh, great feedback. Yes, we should work on that. But it might be something where you realize, I need to kind of sit with this for a little while and try to sort out my initial emotions and reactions around it. What is the actual need that the other person has? Is it rubbing up against a value of mine? And to try to sort out what's truth. Sometimes, I think we know this as leaders, people will bring us feedback that ultimately maybe isn't going to be true or valid. It might be an outlier. But the chances are equally on the other side that there may be something in there that we do need to take action on. And so giving it time to really kind of sort that out and sit with it is okay. And it still builds trust with people if we say, I want some time to think about this. Can I get back to you this afternoon, tomorrow, right? Then step 4 is to make a plan, okay? With whatever you're going to do or not do, what is it going to look like to implement that? When I lived in the Grand Rapids area and used to work at the YMCA, we used to regularly solicit feedback from members. And even if they turned things into us that we knew we weren't going to take action on, we would try to post back to them the reasons why we couldn't move or take action on something they gave us feedback on. And even that kind of dialogue to make sure we make a plan with someone, whether we can act on it or not, is a way to build trust and transparency. And then the 5th one here is to close the loop, right? To circle back around and find out, how is this going? Has anything improved? Where are you at now that we've kind of worked our way through these steps? Okay. Your next opportunity for a personal reflection is here. It's on the top of page 3 in your thought organizer. And we're asking you to just take a minute to think through which of these 5 feedback steps do you think you want to improve on? I know for me, the first 4 often feel easier than the 5th. It's not a great thing, but a lot of times I think I forget to go back and close the loop and just double check. Like once we've made the plan and implemented it, it'd be important for me to try to find ways to go back and see how the person is doing after we've had that conversation. Okay, so again, take just a minute or two in your thought organizer. Which of these steps do you think you need to do the most work on? And feel free if you'd like to share with us in the chat. All right. Step 2 to creating our culture of feedback is going to be to kind of shift from receiving feedback to giving it. So once we've hopefully established that it is a safe space to provide feedback to you, and you've been modeling what it looks like to give it, the hope would be that we have an opportunity ourselves to speak in and give feedback to people in our organization. Okay, and this is both positive, right? We can absolutely give feedback about things that we have seen go well as times where we might need to address something. The impact feedback tool that we use a model called SBI, okay? And the SBI stands for situation, behavior, and impact. And let's walk through a couple examples of what this can look like, okay? So situation, just what the situation was, the factual thing that happened, the specific behavior that you witnessed or saw, and then the impact, what you think happened, kind of the so what, because that behavior happened in that particular situation. So here's one example. When Jane presented her new idea, situation, you rolled your eyes and sighed, okay? 2 factual behaviors that we could observe. Your behavior seemed to stop the flow of ideas from the team, okay? So that would be one potential example. And this would be a situation where, you're feeling a need to maybe address the behavior that's happening because it may not be shaping the culture in the way you want it to. Second one, during the meeting when we were making a decision, situation. You smiled at me and made eye contact. Okay, again, 2 concrete behaviors that encouraged me to continue sharing my idea. The impact here, obviously showing that these are the kinds of things maybe that reflect the values or the behaviors that you're trying to have as a culture in your organization. Okay. We're going to have an opportunity to practice this formula and apply it to the situation that we are maybe experiencing ourselves. But before we get into that, let's take a quick look at what impact feedback is intended to be and not intended to be. Okay. So when we look at what impact feedback is not, the goal is that it's not meant to come across harshly, right? Or with any kind of punitive or authoritarian kind of feel to it. So we're not trying to create a sense of you being criticized or blamed. The goal is to stay away from judgment. Again, I know not everyone has taken kind of our background classes, but in Listens, we spend a lot of time talking about how conflict often becomes very inflated when we interpret a situation or a behavior and we apply our judgment to it. So for example, I might say, you were really unprofessional in the meeting today. And that might be my judgment of your specific behavior, but likely it's going to make someone upset. It might start an argument. They may say, I didn't think I was unprofessional. And you're very quickly in a debate about what unprofessional is, as opposed to just addressing the actual situation and behavior. Okay, so it's not intended to be a judgment. We're trying to get down, like we showed in those examples, to just concrete factual information. It's also not meant to micromanage or give advice. We want to try to basically just present someone with the facts that we saw, the impact we believe it had, and then allow that to be something that they have an opportunity to sit and reflect on. Okay. Impact feedback is meant to be a gift. In the same way that we may recognize that it can be a gift for people to give it to us, because then we're aware that something's going on, it also needs to be something that we see as a gift to give to another person. Okay, and that can be a challenging concept. A lot of times I think we fall into the space of thinking like, I can just accept this. It's really okay. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's only my perspective. But again, the gift of giving feedback is that it does give the other person another perspective to think about and consider, especially if it's connected to values and behaviors that you're trying to hold up in your organization. It's meant to be objective, again, so factual, actionable, and then again, leaving the other person to sort of be the one to be empowered about how they want to receive that feedback. Okay, so it's a way to let people see what you're seeing, basically share your perspective, and help them to see what kind of an impact it might be having on the organization or the team. Our next activity is to have a space to actually provide an impact message to someone. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to think of a situation where you could put an impact message together and deliver it. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to get one written out in your thought organizers. You should have space in the middle of page 4, I think, for you to do this. And then we'll be putting you into small groups to have a chance to talk through your thoughts around this concept in general, share your messages, talk about what might be difficult or challenging about this approach. So we'll tee you up for that, like I said, in just a couple of minutes. So for now, take a minute or two in your thought organizer to try to capture an impact feedback message that you could deliver. Situation, behavior, impact, something that you think could help shape your culture. Okay, so it can be, again, both positive and reinforcing, or maybe something that you think needs to be addressed potentially for change. And if you have any questions, please, again, feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, drop it in the chat. Otherwise, take a minute or two to get an SBI crafted. Take a few more seconds to kind of wrap up your statement. Hopefully everybody's had enough time to get something down. All right. Leanie will be putting us into breakout rooms in just a few minutes here. You'll be in a group, just a small group of 2 to 3 to 4, and we will be in the breakout rooms for about 8 to 10 minutes. We'll send you a broadcast message and let you know kind of how time is progressing there. If you have not ever used a breakout room before, there will be a link that pops up on your screen, a little window that just asks you to accept your breakout room, and you'll enter your breakout room. And then when time is up, you don't have to do anything. It'll just bring you right back into our main session. Okay. But if you do have any questions, again, please feel free to drop us a note in the chat. We'll be happy to help you through that. Make sure you get where you need to be. Lainey, are you ready to open up breakout rooms?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. We will broadcast the questions into you, and then we will let you know when breakout rooms are about to close, and we'll see you back shortly. Welcome back, everyone. Hope your conversations were beneficial in your breakout rooms. We'd love to take a few minutes to just open this up and get a chance to hear some of what you were sharing, thoughts that you have, things that maybe the whole group would benefit from hearing. So any thoughts around this process, what was challenging, what will be helpful? Love to get some thoughts from you all.
I can share. I think that I've done this before, but it just reminds me that sometimes you have to go through a few different iterations of crafting the situation and the behavior so you can remove the emotion or the judgment out of it. Like you may just need to get it all out and then kind of go back through and make the statement more behavior based and targeted. And sometimes you do need to just like get it all out, but then you have to kind of go back through and, you know, pare it down a bit so that you can be very specific about what you're trying to communicate and not inadvertently pass along judgment or criticism or blaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Enid. Yeah, Anetta.
I can tell that I have grown because the very first time that I had to craft, I struggled because that behavior was the majority of the message. For me, I have learned that I need to buffer it. Are you okay today? Especially if I know it can be perceived hard, and I have to make sure, and that gives me time to settle myself and my tone, because I know I can be edgy when I speak, I can be direct. And so I want to make sure before I have to say this behavior, because it is the concrete, that I've kind of given myself a buffer for them to receive and to for me to speak appropriately what must be said.
Mm. Yeah, I love that, Annetta. You're, I think, kind of touching on something that is coming up for us, but just sort of checking in with the person to see if they're in a space maybe to receive feedback can be really important.
That's
Yeah.
important for me. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Anyone else? Thoughts?
I guess this is Tina. I just shared with our group that I have a hard time coming up sometimes with an impact that is concrete and not, you know, when someone new walks in and you don't look up from your computer screen and you don't greet them, they are uncomfortable, they, you know, don't know what to do next, and we want an inviting culture. Well, that's all really perception and my opinion, not concrete. And so that impact message, having it be concrete, can be difficult for me.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate that, Tina. I think the impact message being kind of thought of as the so what part of the message is also really important, but it also is often what tips it over from being kind of just being your own opinion to like what is the bigger picture. Because sometimes people may not agree that we feel a certain way about a certain behavior, but if we can tie it to a bigger impact, then there is something else that they have to think through and consider. So I think you're hitting on something really important there. That impact portion is big. Yeah. Enid, I see your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just had a question about that because I think that what what she said kind of resonates with me, and sometimes people may feel like that it, they may receive the impact that's shared as like nitpicking or not like, so when it feels when somebody's sharing the impact of your behavior on them, but it feels subjective to you,
Mhm.
sometimes if you go backwards up that chain, like you go back to the behavior, then a person can feel like, well, that's small. Like I respond to every email. I'm attentive. So you just are saying you need me to look at you. Like that is, that is, I think now you're picking, and so how
Mm.
can you balance like somebody's, or like this one doesn't want me to look at them. That person doesn't want me to look at them. This person needs 10 seconds of eye contact. Like sometimes for people, it can feel overwhelming to try to meet the needs of so many individuals. So how do you support a person where you're giving them some feedback that will be challenging for them
Yes.
to absorb, because it may feel like, wow, that is the person's real spoken impact, but it feels like it feels maybe kind of nitpicky or subjective, even though the person's felt impact is real to them.
Yeah. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if everybody was wired the same and also wired like us? Then it would be so much more smooth, right? No, Tina's saying no, and I agree with her, right? We need that diversity. But you're right. There is a profound responsibility there for trying to understand what do different people need. Um, I will just offer that I think one of the strategies that we talk a lot about in the listens class, and I know again, not everyone has had that, so I apologize. The quick snippet from that is that when we understand kind of our own preferred style and the preferred styles of others, and we're both able to just openly share that, there is an opportunity to have a little more grace and understanding, right? So for example, if Enid, if you're a really task focused person and you tell me like your preferences for kind of quick task focused interactions at work because that's the mode you're in, and then I share with you that I respect that, but I really have a need to connect with you socially and feel like our relationship is okay. Then the hope is that we can find a balance there between, how can we do some of both? How can we take turns? How can we say like, hey, I'm really stressed today, so I just need 3 minutes to connect with you and make sure we're good. And that we can kind of have some give and take. We also talk in our serves class about like finding the common goal. And so the impact statement, I think, is often tied to that. Hopefully, the people in your organization all want like a healthy work environment where everybody feels seen and understood. So maybe the impact is, if you only do it your way, right? If you never will make eye contact with me or never welcome someone when they walk in, those people are going to have a hard time feeling like they can thrive in our environment, right? And the culture we're trying to create is a space where everybody can thrive, where you can be appreciated for how you are, they can be appreciated for how they are, right? Like tying it back to those bigger organizational values, I think, and the culture we're trying to create might give us a lens in on the impact. I don't know. I hope that that's helpful, or something in that is helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. I think it can also reveal where people may feel fragile, like I'm expected to give all of this support, but I don't feel like I receive it. So they can maybe feel unbalanced, like they're expected to give, but people aren't held to the same standard in terms of the type of support that they find
Yeah.
valuable or important.
Yes, I think that's so important. Yep. If we can create that culture where we're talking about how important it is for everyone to experience that, I think that that's a really important component. The leader's expected to lead, but they are still someone who needs to be receiving too, right? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Lainey, did I miss anything in the chat? I'm keeping an eye on time as well, but I just want to make sure I didn't skip over any questions or anything. We're
Also,
good? Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. One other piece that we want to talk through about delivering feedback and the steps that we go through here, and I think Annette, I appreciate you talking about this because I think your comment really connects into setting the stage. We talk about the importance of thinking through the environment when we're about to deliver feedback, the timing, how we open things up when we do that. For those of you who have listened, you know you have a lot of skills here with your communication cycle knowledge, the nonverbals, the ability to really kind of check in with someone and say, hey, I need 15 minutes today. Can you tell me when you have space to do this? So that they're not caught off guard and maybe feel like they can be in a place where they're expecting to have a conversation. When we deliver that SBI message, we know that as leaders, we also need to be prepared for the fact that we're going to cause some disruption for the other person. We need to be prepared to assist and understand that like there may be a period of time where they need to process the change. We need to be ready to listen, and we have to be really careful to not push them to action too quickly, right? We don't want to jump in and solve the problem for them, because we know if you tell somebody, here's what you're doing wrong and here's what I want you to do about it, that typically comes across more authoritarian, and it's not something that they're going to really have much buy-in to, okay? Because it's just not anything that they have ownership of. The third thing we want to do is check to see if there's legitimate dependency. And what we define as legitimate dependency is basically this idea where someone is not going to be able to get information that they need or a solution. They really do need us to give them some more information. So in this particular case, it might be checking for understanding. Like, do you understand how to do this process? Or do you know where to access these forms? Do you know how to sign up for this training, right? There might be things like that where we're addressing a feedback around a legitimate dependency issue. And in that case, again, it's something you'll have to discern with your wisdom as a leader about whether or not you do need to offer specific direction and more concrete advice. Or if you maybe are in a space still where you don't have to offer it, you can just listen, and maybe they're able to kind of process their way through to a solution that works, okay? So those are some of the stages that we kind of go through as we deliver feedback. The other thing that we have to keep in mind too, just because, you know, it's always good to have a reality check, is you can't control how someone is going to receive the feedback. We don't know what they walk in to work with that day or what they come home with that day. If you're doing this in a personal setting, we can increase the odds of the feedback being received well if we try to practice these different steps, if we've been modeling, if we've been doing our best to kind of keep things factual and behavior-based, if we're taking the time to walk through those steps and set the stage well and listen. But again, we know, like, someone else's thoughts, emotions, actions, we don't have control over that. We can't make someone feel a certain way or create an environment where they'll perfectly experience the things that we want them to experience, okay? The biggest thing we know and kind of lean in on is that idea of, if we drift into that more authoritative feedback, and we're doing things like critiquing, judging, blaming, telling them what to do, that's typically not going to be well received, right? So as much as we can lean into that SBI model and provide a space to listen and understand them, we're in a much better space for things to go well and have a better outcome. One last concept that we think is really interesting, and this touches on the piece that we mentioned at the beginning of recognition. We do think that people are much more receptive to coaching feedback when they feel like they are seen and understood, okay? Again, at work, at home, in other personal settings. And a lot of the research out there varies between, is it a 5-to-1, is it 6-to-1, is it 7-to-1? But there is a pretty common theme out there that needing more, substantially more positive feedback messages before we can hear a coaching feedback message continues to be a pretty solid theme, okay? So if you think about the idea that if someone will put the same weight on one coaching feedback message that potentially corrects them as they do for 7 positive impact messages, hopefully it can help us shift the balance to recognizing, okay, I really do need to spend the majority of my time trying to deliver, this is what I appreciate about you. I like it when this is being done this way. This really supports our culture. Thank you for doing that. And leaning into the positive impact messages is not only more effective it's often also easier, right? It feels less risky. It feels a little less dangerous or scary to us as leaders. So again, if you begin wanting to try to create this feedback culture and you invite it for yourself and you deliver positive feedback to others, that will be a good way forward, right, in terms of making progress. And then when you hit those moments of needing to do the maybe more difficult coaching messages, we know and we see that receptivity is much higher in those situations when people feel like they have trust and they've built that with you over time. All right, we are into our final couple of minutes and we have some quick next steps for you. What I would love for you to do as kind of a wrap up to today's section is on the final page of your thought organizer. There is just a section for general notes. And we find it's really helpful with adult learning if you can walk away from here with some kind of either key takeaway, like one insight that we had, or an action item. Okay, so if you feel like going through the content today, you have one thing that you think, this is where I'm going to take action, that's fantastic. You can capture it in your notes. And for our sake, just to kind of get a feel for where the content is landing and what's having an impact, we'd love it if you could drop it in the chat for us as well, either your action step or your key takeaway. Okay, so feel free to do that. In terms of the next steps, we are in the final session of the series. So again, there's not maybe the same kind of session in terms of, in terms of signing up for the next segment here. However, if you're interested in kind of following our progression and understanding what this looks like, you know that we use this me, we, us kind of model of progression. So individually, we're looking for ways that we can identify where can I make improvement? How can I then begin to do that with other people and invite them into the journey? And ultimately create a full culture of feedback by having our whole team or our organization understand these concepts. We do this at CFCC by taking people on the journey through the Caring Workplace. So the Caring Workplace designation that you can receive touches on these 5 different pillars, and we build up to this by doing our 3 kind of foundational classes. So we have our listens class that you've heard me reference a few times today, as well as our serves and transforms opportunities. We also have a free app, our Community Leads app, which you can access that will give you resources, our podcast, Listen First, which hopefully you've already been connected to, and that will provide some additional information and resources to you free of charge as well. Lainey, I tried to blitz through that very quickly at the end there, make sure we stay on time. Is there anything that you would like to add or wrap up? I know you've been here for the whole series, so please, any final thoughts from you as well?
Sure. Yeah, I would just say thank you to everyone who's been with us for today's session and other sessions leading up to this. I dropped a link for a survey in the chat. We would love to hear your feedback and learn from it so we can improve for next time. And I also dropped a link for registering for any of these classes or any other continuous learnings. We will also be sending an email out post-class, and if you complete that survey, that's where you can get your take-back materials relating to creating a culture of feedback. And you can also scan the QR code here on this slide, or there's the link in the chat. And I believe that's it from me, Leanne.
All right, thanks, Lainey. Thank you all for making the time to join today. If you need to go, please feel free to go, and we'll hang out for a couple minutes if you had any final questions. Thank you again.